Yesterday we talked about civil rights organizations. That's what the bell ringer was about that you answered in Canvas chat. And the media assignment, once again, if you didn't do that or submit that already, don't forget you need 10 facts and 5 interpretations about the Martin Luther King video, and 5 facts and 2 interpretations about the Malcolm X video. So today we'll look at the notes about the second most famous civil rights leader besides Martin Luther King, which would be Malcolm X. Malcolm X, yep. And as it said in the video, he originally started as Malcolm Little. And as I said there, his father was a fan of black nationalism. Now, black nationalism doesn't necessarily mean that people that are black want their own nation. What it means, in the sense of a country, what it means is they want their own community and cultural identity. And of course, one of the issues is over 90% of people that are black, probably more than 95%, don't have any culture based on the fact that they can trace their roots back to slavery and they were taken from Africa, so they don't really have any connection to their past. And so his father had been a fan of another black nationalist, as I mentioned in the video there, and because of that, they were harassed quite a bit, and their home had been vandalized, and eventually, of course, their father had been found murdered, as they suggested, under mysterious circumstances. So it was highly suspected by Malcolm and the rest of his family that their father had been murdered by some of the white supremacists. No, they did not. It was not really a top priority of police to find out what happened when a black person died mysteriously. So the next stage of his life, as it mentioned, his mother had health issues, so he ended up on his own quite a bit, and he was eventually convicted of burglary. It was there in prison that he eventually was exposed to Islam, and so he began his conversion.
To the religion of Islam?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So he began his conversion to Islam. And he would eventually end up joining the Nation of Islam, which is an organization that still exists today. Mm-hmm. The Nation of Islam. And of course, one of the main beliefs that he got from the Nation of Islam was that white society was working to oppress African Americans. Which, in fairness, that was true, because the southern states had official laws oppressing black citizens. So it was a fact. It wasn't just an opinion. Now, in the north, that wasn't necessarily true, except in some cities. There were some cities in the north that were also segregated. Eventually, he changed his name to, of course, Malcolm X. And the reason why he did that is because most African Americans, their last names are made up. They were given to them by slaves, or perhaps they got them whenever they gained their freedom and moved somewhere else. But basically, their namesakes are not from their original African culture, one of the many things that was forgotten. And so he decided to change his last name to X because of that. I believe so. That's a good question. Let me check. While I'm doing that, he also at first believed in what is called black separatism. Black separatism. This meant that he believed that blacks should separate from whites, that many of the problems that existed amongst African Americans were because, first of all, that they were oppressed, but also because they kept trying to fit into white society, but that was never going to happen. So he preached about separating blacks from whites. In that, he also believed blacks should start to identify with their own culture. They should try to make connections, for instance, to their African heritage. Eventually, though, he decided that the leadership of the Nation of Islam was corrupt. He believed the leadership of the Nation of Islam was corrupt, mainly because the head of the organization, as I said in the video there, had a number of affairs, cheated on his wife. So he left the organization and then eventually traveled to Mecca, which is spelled Mecca. And yes, he did formally change his name.
Right to this.
Yep, Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that. Yeah. When he traveled there, which is a religious site for Muslims, he discovered that there were all kinds of different people there. There were people of African descent, Arabic descent, European descent. And so he decided, even though he believed that maybe it was black people tried to make their own way in America, he wasn't necessarily as opposed to people working together. So when he returned, he started to change his message and he started to say we shouldn't hate white people, we should embrace them and love them. And that was mostly due to his faith. So after he returned, the FBI had warned that he was probably going to be attacked by other members of the Nation of Islam, the organization he used to belong to. So he was warned in advance. So he did start using bodyguards. In fact, in 1965, his house was bombed, but he and his family survived. 1965.
What's up with white people and bombing?
I don't know. Well, I think in this case, I mean, I'm not sure that they determined exactly who did it, but it was suspected it was the Nation of Islam, so it might have been other black people.
Why didn't he just use that as an excuse and run away somewhere?
Because that's a good question. Why didn't he use that to figure out, boy, I'm really in danger. I should probably hide somewhere. Well, just like Martin Luther King, he considered it his duty to continue to go out and give speeches and to promote equality and continue to push for African Americans to link to their past and try to improve themselves as people. So he continued to give speeches, and so that same month, actually, just 7 days after that bombing occurred, he was giving a speech when he was shot to death. So that also occurred in 1965. So tomorrow we'll talk about civil rights issues in general, and that will be the last day of the notes. For the remainder of today, don't forget to turn in the media document if you haven't already. And for the rest of the period, finish the reading if you haven't done so. And you can also work ahead if you wish. So go ahead and use the rest of the period wisely to turn in the media document if you haven't already and complete the reading if you haven't done so.